Not at their new home in Frogmore Cottage, as many had expected, but inside a London hospital, the story of the birth quietly shifted. Despite Meghan having previously expressed a desire for a home birth, reality intervened. At 37 and expecting her first child, a hospital setting was always the more likely outcome, no matter how carefully the narrative had been framed beforehand. Good evening from London, and welcome to another deep dive here on US King Master. As public attention shifted, reviews of Harry and Meghan's high-budget Netflix series began rolling in, and they were anything but flattering. Described as unimaginative and frustrating by Variety, the series struggled to convince even sympathetic critics. Once again, the couple found themselves battling skepticism rather than applause. It always seems to begin the same way with Meghan Markle. Soft lighting, a carefully composed photograph, a subtle pose designed to feel intimate, almost mystical. A story released gently enough to sound believable, just enough to discourage questions. And then, almost on cue, the public is expected to accept the narrative fully, without hesitation or scrutiny. This time, however, questions refused to stay quiet. The birth reportedly took place at a private hospital in Westminster, known for specializing in healthcare for women and children. Other members of the royal family, including Prince Harry's cousins, had been born at Portland Hospital before. Yet for reasons still debated, this particular birth sparked unusually intense curiosity and criticism. Leading that charge was Piers Morgan. When new claims surfaced suggesting that Meghan's pregnancy narratives were not merely inconsistent, but deliberately constructed, Morgan reacted exactly as expected. He went all in. Even in a dramatized retelling, you can imagine the studio lights flaring as he leaned forward and demanded, "So which part was real, any of it?" The fallout was severe. Whatever fragile ties remained between the Sussexes and the royal family appeared further strained. At the same time, their own public credibility took another hit. The timing was almost poetic. After months of PR missteps and commercial disappointments, this controversy landed like a final blow. According to Morgan, what he called the mother of all contradictions wasn't just a matter of memory lapses or poor communication. He claimed the stories actively contradicted one another, so much so that even a seasoned Netflix writer would struggle to keep the plot straight. And that's where this story truly begins, because the so-called new evidence, fictionalized here for exposé tone, didn't emerge quietly. It wasn't whispered through anonymous leaks or buried in obscure reports. It arrived loudly, explosively. Internal notes, clashing timelines, conflicting statements, and carefully selected images all pointed, in Morgan's view, to one conclusion: that motherhood moments had been staged the same way PR moments always are, with precision, angles, lighting, and total narrative control. Paparazzi, journalists, and camera crews were everywhere, following him relentlessly every hour of every day. The unraveling, she later claimed, began that very week, when he suddenly stopped taking her calls. It was a line delivered for maximum impact, and once again, the media machine roared to life. What followed was brutal, theatrical, and unmistakably vintage Piers Morgan. On air, he pointed to one clip after another. In one image, the baby bump appeared unusually high. In the next, noticeably lower. In one moment it was carefully cradled. In another it seemed to vanish entirely. Reasonable observers might blame clothing, posture, or camera angles. But Piers doesn't trade in reasonable explanations, he trades in headlines. This wasn't maternity, he snarled into the camera. This was marketing. He argued that the timeline of the Sussexes' public pregnancy announcements never aligned with behind-the-scenes schedules. The secrecy around medical details, he claimed, wasn't about dignity or privacy, it was about diversion. According to Piers, every inconsistency, every unanswered question, formed part of what he called a carefully curated myth of maternal suffering. And this is where the story, as we examine it here on US King Master, takes a dramatic turn. Piers claimed that someone close to the Sussexes, a fictional insider for the sake of this exposed-style narrative, had finally reached their breaking point. That person allegedly handed over what they described as the real timeline, private diary entries and internal scheduling memos that didn't just challenge Meghan's public version of events, they completely dismantled it. The dates didn't line up. Public appearances clashed with claimed trimesters. Hospital visits were supposedly logged on days when Meghan was photographed on the opposite side of London. Even the claim of a quiet, serene hospital arrival came under fire. "I'm just going to say it," Piers declared. "This is a 2-hour trashing of the royal family, the monarchy, and everything the Queen spent her life protecting." According to the notes he waved in the air, Meghan wasn't even in the building that day. The studio audience gasped. Social media erupted. Supporters cried fabrication. But for Piers, this was blood in the water. He slammed the papers onto the desk like a prosecutor delivering a final verdict. "I'm sick," he said, "of being told we must simply accept whatever version of events Meghan Markle invents." He insisted he wasn't a conspiracy theorist, just someone pointing out contradictions that were now impossible to ignore. In his telling, Meghan hadn't merely embellished her pregnancy experience. She had weaponized it, turning motherhood into a shield against criticism and an emotional trump card to silence dissent. "This," he said, lifting a single sheet of paper for maximum effect, "is not the story of a woman tormented by the palace. It's the story of a palace tormented by a woman who never met a spotlight she didn't want to choreograph." And then came the twist, because there is always a twist. Piers claimed the same evidence also undercut Meghan's most emotional accusation, that palace staff treated her coldly, dismissively, even cruelly during her pregnancy. According to him, the memos told a very different story. He read aloud, "Aides were instructed to accommodate every request without delay, no matter how unusual or inconvenient." Another line followed, "Multiple staff worked double shifts to fulfill unscheduled wardrobe demands." Another, "She declined certain meetings, then later claimed she had been excluded." He read the documents as if they were scripture, revealing the collapse of an empire. "This," he said with theatrical satisfaction, "is the opposite of oppression." Then he delivered the line he knew would trend. She didn't want privacy. She wanted production control. Love him or loathe him, Piers Morgan understands performance. He builds tension like a conductor, slapping the desk, slicing the air, lowering his voice to a slow, damning whisper. And as he closed, he made his final claim. This was never just a baby story. It was something far more calculated. He calls it a brand story. But according to Piers Morgan, the most explosive part of this fictionalized account is still to come. Because, he insists, the new evidence doesn't just reveal inconsistencies in the pregnancy timeline, it exposes motive. A motive he claims Meghan has relied on for years. Emotional leverage. And once you see that, he argues, the entire Sussex saga looks very different. Piers points directly to the Oprah interview. "How convenient," he says, "that every allegation of cruelty dovetailed perfectly with a dramatic narrative arc. How each claim arrived with flawless emotional timing. Every revelation landing with cinematic precision. In the studio, you can feel the shift. The audience murmurs. Viewers at home lean forward, gripping their glasses just a little tighter. Now, as we always remind you here on US Kingmaster, this portion remains opinion and conjecture within the tone of today's exposed-style narrative." But Piers presses on, anchoring his argument to a date the world knows well, May 6, 2019, the day Archie Mountbatten Windsor was born. "These documents," Piers says, "paint a picture of someone scripting her life in real time. Someone who believes reality should bend to the story she wants to tell, not the other way around." Then, in the most unmistakably Piers Morgan moment of all, he stares straight into the camera. "I'm not saying she didn't struggle," he says. "I'm not saying she didn't face pressure. I'm saying she used motherhood as a narrative tool." And with that, he declares that the scaffolding holding the story together is beginning to collapse. The fictional insider's notes, those Piers claims prove deception, are spread across the desk like confetti at a royal scandal parade. He gathers them, pauses, and delivers the line that electrifies the room. "She wasn't asking for empathy," he says. "She was manufacturing it." That's when the chaos truly begins. Social media explodes. Commentators divide into warring camps. Meghan's defenders call it misogynistic fantasy. Her critics call it long overdue accountability. And Piers? He sits back, composed, almost smug, daring Meghan to respond. Because he knows, and we know, that in royal storytelling, silence is rarely the end of the story, and this, he says, is only the first half. What follows feels less like commentary and more like a cinematic showdown. The kind where you can almost hear the bass drop as the tension tightens. After Piers Morgan's scorched earth monologue hits the airwaves, every fracture in the Sussex narrative begins to widen, and the strangest part? Meghan doesn't respond. Not immediately. Not with a statement. Not through a spokesperson. Not even with a carefully choreographed paparazzi appearance. Nothing. Just silence. Piers knows exactly how to use that silence. On his next broadcast, he leans back in his chair like a man who believes the universe itself has just validated him. No denial, he says calmly. And in his world, that means everything. No correction. No clarification. And certainly no lawsuit. And according to Piers Morgan, that silence is telling. Especially, he notes, because Meghan has never hesitated to sue before, over a children's book critique, a private letter to her father, even a brief mention in a documentary. Yet this time, he says, tapping the stack of fictional documents on his desk, there is nothing that he lets the silence stretch. Perfectly timed. Almost theatrical. It's almost, he suggests, as if she doesn't want Discovery revealing what really went on. And there it is, the bait hanging in the air. Because for years, Piers argues, Meghan's greatest strength has been control of the narrative. But when accusations focus on contradictions within her own storytelling, silence starts to resemble confirmation. Here on US Kingmaster, we track the moment the public mood shifts. Online, defenders begin using words like strange and inconsistent. Others admit they always felt something was off. Even celebrity allies, the ones who once posted glowing tributes and inspirational quotes, suddenly disappear. No hashtags. No statements. No supportive interviews. Hollywood goes quiet. Piers senses the momentum, and he's far from finished. One by one, he unveils new pieces of the fictional puzzle, like a magician pulling endless scarves from a hat. He plays clips of Meghan describing debilitating morning sickness, then cuts to public appearances on those very same days where she looks composed and energetic. He contrasts claims of isolation with staff memos assigning multiple aides to her daily schedule. He shows footage of her dramatically cradling her stomach at an event. Then, days later, footage of her jogging upstairs with ease. He freezes frames from the Oprah interview, pausing at moments where the lighting catches her expression just right. She rehearses, he says, voice sharp with conviction. The pauses. The emotional crescendos. The tears that never quite fall. This isn't authenticity. This is dramaturgy, and people keep watching. Because whether you love him or hate him, Piers Morgan knows how to command attention. But the most explosive moment arrives when he reads from the fictional insider notes. According to the document, Meghan allegedly requested multiple versions of the birth story be drafted in advance. For future press guidance, Piers lifts the paper like a trophy. Multiple versions, he repeats. Who does that? Who pre-writes a birth narrative unless they plan to control it like everything else? Then he pulls another sheet. She allegedly insisted that optics take priority. Optics, about childbirth. He exhales slowly. This is not a woman crushed by palace systems, he declares. This is someone directing her life like a Hollywood production, complete with storyboards. That single word, storyboards, ignites the internet. Within hours, memes flood social media. Split screens appear, placing Meghan beside famous film directors, captioned, "Executive producer, my life," and just like that, the narrative shifts again. Others begin editing mock movie posters, branding the controversy the bump saga. And through it all, Meghan remains silent, Harry too. That silence only gives Piers Morgan more ammunition. You can't say the world was cruel to you, that you wanted privacy, he scoffs, and then publish books, documentaries, and interviews about how much you hate attention. That on yet another broadcast, Piers leans forward. He argues that Harry built his public identity on truth. But the moment the timeline starts wobbling, Harry disappears. Because, Piers suggests, if he steps forward, every follow-up question risks exposing yet another contradiction. He then flashes what he claims are message logs showing Harry giving staff conflicting instructions on how to discuss the pregnancy. Why the confusion? Piers asks, why the mixed messages? Why the secrecy, unless the truth itself wasn't consistent? Then comes the line that detonates the internet. Either she lied to Harry, or they lied together. Screens pause. Clips replay. Social feeds explode. And suddenly the conversation shifts, from pregnancy inconsistencies to something darker. Something Piers names deliberately and slowly, partnership in manipulation. This isn't one person misleading the public, he says. This is a team effort. A royal partnership, he claims, built not on duty, but on deceit. And while the world argues, speculates, and spirals, the royal family does the most damaging thing possible. They stay completely silent. No statements. No denials. No recollections may vary. Nothing. That vacuum makes Piers' voice echo even louder. When a story is false, the palace responds immediately, he tells viewers. When it's absurd, they dismiss it. But when there's silence, truth is being allowed to surface on its own. Commentators clash. TikTok analysts dissect every old clip. Pundits weigh in. Conspiracy theorists reappear. And at the center of it all stands Piers Morgan, unmoved. By now, he's reframed the scandal as a moral issue. This isn't just royal drama, he insists. This is about honesty. About trust. About the public's right to question a story when it stops making sense. Then comes the final blow, the line replayed everywhere. If she lied about this, what didn't she lie about? It lands hard. Because this is where Meghan's carefully built image begins to crack. Not from palace pressure, not from media bias, but from narrative collapse. The timeline doesn't align. The stories don't match. The silence doesn't save her. And in the closing moments of this fictional exposé, Piers delivers his verdict. If this is the beginning of the end of Meghan Markle's credibility, he says, leaning forward as his voice drops to a whisper, she has only one person to blame, herself. The lights dim. The credits roll. And the world waits for the next twist. If you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, you're watching US King Master. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.